No, no.
The man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Jeremy Davis. You are, let me just give you some accolades here. You are
Oh,
what does your bio say? Internationally recognized leader in the CDH1 hereditary diffuse gastric cancer and lobular breast
mm,
cancer world. So,
mm.
I mean, no big deal.
Okay,
No
okay,
big deal.
okay.
Uh, but personally, you are the doctor who removed my stomach. So I'm not biased at all when I say that you're the best. So,
Guilty.
but you kind of just, yes, guilty, guilty. You just had a pretty big life change, moved from NIH, which is where my stomach was removed, and now you are the chief of surgical oncology division at University of Maryland Medical System. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I'm here. I can't show you out the window, but there's a new pavilion, cancer pavilion going up right outside my door and or my window, and yeah, I made it to Baltimore.
You made it to Baltimore. Well, uh, thanks for doing this with me
Of
today.
course.
I thought that it would be fun to just kind of, or not fun, but interesting to kind of take a step back and just talk about CDH1. I find that as a mutation carrier, it's so hard for me to explain like what exactly this mutation is and
Yeah.
how it affects the stomach lining and kind of why it's a threat. So you're so good at explaining things. So do you wanna just kind of give us a baseline?
Yeah, I'll just as a reminder and real quick, does this gets recorded and then people can watch it again?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes. It's
what a
gonna be on the
treat.
internet
What a
forever.
treat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So I'll be careful what I say. You know, I what I try to explain to people is that, every gene in your body and in your cells, every gene is a basically it's DNA. It's a series of basically letters that helps, tell the body how to turn that code into some sort of protein that does something. And so CDH1 is a gene that everybody has in every cell of their body, and you have two copies of that gene. And to function, a lot of cells, or most cells, will need that CDH1 gene to basically be turned on and have the protein produced. The protein's called E-cadherin for the cells to do what they do. Now, you get a copy from mom and a copy from dad. Um, and in the case of people like you, one of those copies is not quite right. There's some there's some spelling errors, right, in that code. And what that basically means is that that copy of the gene is faulty and it doesn't produce or won't produce protein the way we expect it to. Now, the good news is you've got the other normal copy. And so you're functioning pretty well with that one copy. But it would kind of be like an airplane with two engines. Airplanes can usually fly with one engine. They don't like to, but they can, okay? The problem is if that second engine goes out. Big deal, right? And it's the same thing in your stomach and likely in the breast, that at some point that second normal copy of the gene goes out, okay? And just like the airplane will then need to kind of, make some sort of emergency landing, what your body does then is it starts to, or the cells, I should say, that lose that second copy then start to something starts to go awry. And then that's where things start to happen, and we can talk more about that later. But basically that's what puts you at risk for developing stomach cancer or breast cancer, is that not having that first copy is already like that plane flying on one engine. It's not great, but it's doable.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so at least I am partway functioning.
Some would say that you're highly functional.
Fantastic. So let's talk about, I did read the paper that you wrote. There's a lot of really big words in there.
Did it put you to
Um,
sleep? Did
it
it put
sure,
you to sleep?
yeah, had a great snooze.
If you ever want to go to sleep, just read one of my papers. It'll put you right to sleep.
Well, appreciate it. I'll just keep a stack,
Yeah, there you go.
Um, but it is this kind of debate of surveillance versus surgery
Yeah.
is so polarizing, and it's also the hardest decision that a CDH1 gene mutation carrier is going to face, because it is irreversible. So, and I know that a lot has changed even since 2020 when I had my stomach removed, and
Yeah.
maybe the percentages were a little bit higher.
Yeah.
So do you want to use your big words and tell us what your paper says?
Yeah, so I think you introduced that really well. I really do. And here's the truth. You're right. If you had come and seen me back in 2015, when I got to the NIH, I think the way that I would have interacted with you or counseled you about CDH1 and your cancer risk would have sounded very differently than it does now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways that's a good thing, right? What I tell folks is that we're making progress, and that progress, what it looks like is our conversations are changing because the data or the evidence are changing. So the genesis of this paper, this is the one that put you to sleep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
Yeah, this is it. It looks familiar, right? Okay. So
There's a lot of graphs.
yeah. Yes, beautiful graphs made by Dr. Galanis. She did a great job. But you know, this paper came about because there were a bunch of questions that were coming up that not many people or anybody had an answer to. And one of the issues was, what do we do with younger people? Specifically, we were getting some phone calls and emails about, really like teenagers, okay? And so it started to get us thinking about, well, how do we care for, let's say, teenagers differently than we care for, an adult? I think the other thing that came up was that, I would have people come into my office who were, let's say, 60 years old or 65, and they'd say, you know what? I've had a good life. I'll do whatever I need to do. But what I really care about my kids and my grandkids,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what concerns me. So all of this was, these conversations were going on, and what we didn't know when we were counseling people was whether or not gastric cancer incidence or the occurrence of gastric cancer in individuals with CDH1, or even their outcomes, how are they potentially different in younger folks versus older folks, right? Because you can imagine somebody with CDH1 walking into your office at 16 versus 66. Their approach to this can be very different, and people's emotions can be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one.
Okay.
And I'll pause there just to kind of clarify anything or answer any questions that you might have, because I don't want to just kind of talk forever.
I think all of us could listen to you talk forever, because this is so important to us. And you're right. I think a lot of us, even who have had the earlier conversations with you, are glad that if we did the surgery, that we did the surgery, because it's led to this research.
Yeah.
So I think this is very exciting research.
Well, I'm biased. And you're biased too. Okay, so that's the genesis, right? What do we do with younger people? Are younger people at higher risk? I mean, do we need to kind of be more worried with younger people, right? So that was kind of where this was all coming from. So you mentioned a couple things. We had, or you gave me some good starting places. So first of all, we had already seen in a few cases here and there, right, that there's a report of a young person with a CDH1 mutation, and they did an endoscopy and they found those signet ring cells, right? And you can, sometimes that appeared on the Facebook group or, excuse me.
Oh my goodness.
Goodness gracious. Need a little bit of.
You just get choked up over this.
Yeah, I get so, yeah. Okay, so we had heard about some people really young, like 10 years old, having these signet ring cells, right? So all that information is out there. The other thing that was happening around this time, and you guys have probably heard about this, this is our paper that we wrote, or it came out, I think, last year, about kind of what is the risk of cancer, in people with CDH1. And it turns out in that paper, right, that we said, if you come from a family with no obvious history of stomach cancer, it's possible that your lifetime risk is as low as maybe 10%, maybe up to 20%. But if you have a really a heavy or strong family history of stomach cancer, maybe that risk is as high as 40%. So that's the background there. And then, like you mentioned or alluded to, these signet ring cells, we're starting to figure out, man, we're finding these in almost everybody that we at least do a gastrectomy on, a prophylactic gastrectomy on. So that's where we started. But we said, let's focus on young people. So there's a category in oncology called adolescents and young adults. And it's clearly defined as people 39 years of age or younger. I clearly would not be in that group anymore. I am not.
Holding on by a thread.
You're holding on. Okay. So I made a few notes to remind myself of a few things. So we looked at our group of people like you that came to the NIH over about a 6-year period. And we only looked at people that were 39 years or younger. So they fall into this well-defined category of adolescent or young adult. We ended up having 188 people to look at, and they ranged in age actually from 12 years old to 39. And these are people who have a CDH1 mutation that's either defined as pathogenic or likely pathogenic. I'm not going to go into those details because I think most people know what that means. Now, it was definitely a young cohort. That's what we were going for because we really want to try to understand if we should manage young people differently. So most people, their average age when they underwent genetic testing was around 28 years old, and that makes sense. Most people aren't getting genetic testing in their teenage years, but again, we did have some people in that group that were under the age of 18. So the first thing that we reported, which makes me feel good, is that over 90% of those people, after getting their genetic test results, got an upper endoscopy, right? So that's super important. We want to make sure that you get a diagnosis of a CDH1 mutation, whether or not you have a strong family history or not, just go and get that endoscopy. And here's the statistic that I think is important. Out of those folks that had an endoscopy, I said about 90%, so it's 171 people who actually got an endoscopy after their diagnosis. In 2 of those people, we found cancer. And I don't mean signet ring cells. I mean like they had real deal cancer that had to go and get treated. Wow. Okay? So that's 1%. So what I tell people is the reason you want to go get a scope after you get diagnosed is because there is a small chance that you've been walking around, you didn't know it, but now you got the diagnosis of CDH1. Get that scope because there's a small chance we could find cancer. Not what we want to talk about, but it just, it is what it is. Okay, so now we get into the meat and potatoes. So about 60% of people in this group chose to undergo surveillance. Now, the first criticism of that is like, wow, more than half of people chose surveillance. We know that that's institutional bias. And what we did is we looked at the time period, over that 6-year period. And it's true, in the beginning, more people were choosing total gastrectomy. But as we learned more about the safety of surveillance, that shifted and slightly more people chose endoscopy over prophylactic gastrectomy. But the point is, in this paper, out of all the people that chose endoscopic surveillance and during the follow-up period, which was relatively short, only about 2 years of follow-up, we didn't diagnose anybody with advanced cancer, meaning people were under surveillance, over that 2-year period, and nobody in that group that was under surveillance developed an advanced cancer. And I think that's one of the concerns, right, is if I do surveillance, even for a short period of time, what's the chances that I might develop a bad cancer? And in this group, and we've published this similarly before, nobody developed advanced cancer. Now, on the other hand, those 40% of people that had prophylactic gastrectomy, so you're in this group, okay? Um, 93% of those gastrectomy specimens that we took out, or 93%, so almost all of them had those little signet ring cells in it, right? So this is the point I try to hammer home with all of you guys, is that if you have the CDH1 mutation, pathogenic or likely pathogenic mutation, and we take out your stomach, we're going to find those signet ring cells more often than not
Mm-hmm.
in almost everybody. And what you have to remember is, out of all those people that had their stomach out, if you went back and looked at their endoscopy, and I can't remember, did we do your endoscopy at NIH before you had your stomach out?
Yes, and we didn't find anything. So
Okay.
everyone else in my family, you found something. So they, felt confident going into surgery. I was like, I don't know, maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
yeah, so you're part of this statistic, because if you look in here, out of all those people that went to get their gastrectomy, okay, prophylactic gastrectomy, if you look back at their endoscopies, only about half of them did we find signet ring cells, during that endoscopy with random biopsies. So what it tells you, or reminds you, is that if we go in endoscopically and take a bunch of random biopsies, we may or may not find the signet ring
Right.
cells. But when we take the stomach out and the pathologist can look at the entire stomach under the microscope, then of course you're more likely to find them. And that, I think that kind of makes sense.
Well,
Okay.
because you're not just taking little snippets.
Exactly. We can look at the whole darn thing. Now, this is where I'm going to wrap up, because out of this whole paper, the thing that I was really looking for is there any kind of pattern, right?
Mhm.
Because you and I may have had this conversation before where people will say, hey, my uncle died at the age of 55 with stomach cancer. I'm 45. I don't want to get stomach cancer. I think I want to get my stomach out now, with this idea that, you know, they're going to be at higher risk as they approach 55 because that's when their uncle developed cancer. Or maybe it's a parent, my mother, my father. And so what we asked was, even within a family or lots of families, is there a pattern? Do people tend to develop it, under the age of 40 in this family or whatever? And so the short answer is no. There's no pattern. And the one thing that I want to show, just because it highlights a little bit, and it's not going to probably show well, but the graph, all the graph is showing is that you've got lots of little dots
Mhm.
everywhere, and those are individual people with stomach cancer diagnoses, either advanced cancer, signet ring cells, whatever. And there's no pattern. It's not like, your risk peaks at a certain age and then goes down, or even within families, we looked for patterns. And so what I tell people is that that's the part that's probably even more unsettling for you guys, which is it's kind of random,
Mhm.
right? There's no pattern. And I wish I could tell you that we understand it. Clearly we don't. But what that means is that somebody in your family could have developed gastric cancer at the age of 65, but then somebody could turn around in that same family and develop at 25, or vice versa, and we
Right.
just don't know.
Right.
And we just don't know. And that was the real takeaway for
Mhm.
me from that study, which is we can't just make assumptions based on family members and say, oh, they got it at 40, you better get your stomach out before 40. It doesn't quite work that way. Okay? So I think that's kind of the summary of the paper. And the only thing I want to say real quick, and I'll give it back to you.
No, that's fine.
We couldn't have done this without the support, financial support of No Stomach for Cancer, DLH Foundation and Thad Hamilton,
Mhm.
and Stupid Strong Charitable Foundation and Jeff
Mhm.
Netzer. So when people ask about, if I donate money or contribute money, right? That's how we're able to do stuff like this.
Well, I mean, I think you and I have talked a lot about the human aspect of it and how, I mean, for me, it would not matter if we had the conversation 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or today, even with the research, because I'm so risk avoidant. And it was an easy decision because I couldn't, the anxiety was too
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming. But I think other people are more maybe willing to to walk the line of risk
Yeah.
because they don't want to make the life change. And for some people, that life change is too big, and it's understandable why they wouldn't go through with surgery or just take the route, of surveillance, is a better way to put it. And let's do you mind kind of talking about surveillance and surgery? I mean, I wanted to know all the nitty gritty of exactly, like, I think people, when you say, oh yeah, I had my stomach removed, they're like, so how are you put back together? How does that work? And then from the surveillance side, like, how often are you kind of recommending people to getting surveillance, getting the scope done, and kind of what happens during a scope? And are there things, I think we talked about this in Portugal, like certain things that you're looking for during the scope? Is it more
Yeah.
targeted versus random? Um,
Yeah. No, I think these are excellent questions. And, by the way, I think talking about your personal experience is really important, which is why I think, as we've learned more, we've suggested to people, if you're thinking about getting your stomach out, talk to somebody else who's done it, not to necessarily try to pattern yourself after that person, but hear their story, how they came to their decision, what kind of factored into it. And I think it gives people a better understanding of kind of, how they're going to deal with it. I think the gastrectomy question is the easiest one right now, because once I think somebody makes a decision to have their stomach removed, which I think is, again, a deeply personal decision. As you know, I try not to push people one way or the other. I know that's not something that everybody in my field agrees with, but I think it's important for you guys to come to this decision on your own with help, with guidance and stuff like that. But, taking the stomach out and putting you back together, I mean, basically your stomach comes out and we have to connect your intestine up to your esophagus so that you can eat and drink. And as you know, because you are friends with a lot of people out there that are stomachless, and, you can, eat and drink and needs in this kind of new way, new plumbing, so to speak. But as you know, how each of you kind of responds, or your body responds to having the stomach removed, is just so terribly different.
mm-hmm.
And so what I tell folks is that from a surgical perspective, and I'm trying to be, kind even to myself, it's pretty straightforward, right? Technically, I think it's pretty straightforward, but I think it's all the other stuff that matters. Obviously you want, it to be done well and done right, but it's really all the long-term aftercare, as
Mm-hmm.
diet and, probably even exercise and, just what you're putting in your mouth. I think the more complicated discussion is this whole surveillance thing, which you alluded to. How many biopsies? What are we looking for? All that stuff. And, we're still learning. So we wrote a paper a few years ago that outlined why we thought that surveillance was relatively safe and effective, at least in the short term. And in that paper, what we said was, what we learned over the years at NIH was that, yeah, we kind of expect, if we go in and take a bunch of random biopsies of a normal looking stomach, which most of you, like I said in our paper, 99% had a normal looking stomach, we're going to find those signet ring cells sometimes, sometimes not. And we know they're there. So what's the goal of surveillance? And so what we've learned is it's probably, we need to be on the lookout for whatever it is that signals that things are changing or something's changing.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably only takes one of those little spots of signet ring cells to decide that they're going to, they're going to revolt and they're going to start doing some crazy stuff. So what are we looking for? Well, right now it's super basic. We're looking for something that doesn't look normal. And I don't know how to describe this except, is anybody in your family like a mechanic of any kind, does, fixes cars or anything? But if you ever go to I don't know, you don't, right? Your dad's like a dentist, so.
Yeah, he can fix or create anything. He's Superman, but
No mechanics. But
I
have
would
you been
not
to a
be an
mechanic
expert.
before? Have you
No,
been to a mechanic?
I have. I think that they've oversold me on everything. So,
You need the extra undercoating thing.
yes.
Okay.
Oh, obviously I do. Yes.
But you know, sometimes you take your car to a mechanic and you start the engine and they hear something and they can like they know
Right.
what it is, right? They
Right.
hear it, they're like, "Ah, I know what
Hmm.
that is." That I'm using that analogy because if a gastroenterologist who's experienced in, you know, scoping people, you know, with stomach abnormalities or whatever, which most of them are,
Hmm.
they know what's kind of normal and what's not. They
Yeah.
go, "Yeah, you know, that looks a little suspicious," right? That's kind of
Yeah.
just that's their thing. That's what they do. And so what we learned is that we started focusing on what's abnormal. If it doesn't look right, whatever, we're going to biopsy it. Now, the truth is when we biopsy stuff that looks abnormal, it's still true that the vast majority of those abnormalities are still benign.
Hmm.
They're not cancer.
Hmm.
But what we're learning is that if we're actively looking for the stuff that's not right, that
Hmm.
I think we're going to be more likely to catch stuff when it's really, really early. And in that paper that we wrote, and we're getting ready to write another kind of update to that, we've only had two people under regular surveillance over the years that, you know, basically came back at some interval,
Hmm.
which I'll get to in a second, where we said, you know, that wasn't there before, or that looks abnormal.
Hmm.
And then those people came off that pathway and we said, no, no, enough's enough. We're taking out your stomach and dealing with it. So in that paper, that was two people amounted to like, you know, I think, you know, less than 2% of the entire group. And it just tells me that if you're under surveillance or if you have enough people with CDH1 under surveillance for a long enough time, somebody may actually develop an early cancer. And our hope is that by looking for abnormalities, not so much taking random biopsies anymore,
Hmm.
is the key. So we used to take 88 random biopsies, not anymore. We need to reduce that. The Cambridge group still recommends 28 to 30 biopsies. The truth is, even then, it's kind of like, what are we doing? What are we looking for? So our research is trying to really hammer home on that. But we think the interval, so that's the last
Hmm.
part, how often?
Right.
Every 12 months is probably pretty reasonable. I think we certainly address things on a case-by-case basis. If something's maybe a little funny looking, but the biopsy was negative, but we're still not sure, maybe we'll bring you back in 6 months. Signet ring cells, when we used to find them on a random biopsy, we would say that's a reason to come back in 6 months. But the truth is, I'm starting, and some of us are starting to rethink that. Does that really mean you should come back in 6 months? We know they're there anyway.
Right.
So that's evolving, and I think we're trying to push that, you know, a bit. So, you know, we'll see what we can do in the years to come.
And so as people are kind of going to their doctors and discussing, surveillance versus surgery, what are some questions that you would suggest the patient ask not only the doctor, but kind of also themselves as they're kind of at this crossroads?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you always want to, you know, be blunt with the physician and go, do you see a lot of this?
Hmm.
You know, if they say no, that doesn't mean that you have to turn around and run
Yeah.
away. But I think you need to get an understanding that, okay, are they willing and able to kind of put in the time and effort, you know, to do this, right? I don't think they need to be Albert Einstein. They just need to do a really good job and do a really good endoscopy, and they need to take a really good look at what's going on. Um, they need to care, right? They need to try. But I do think you need to ask how comfortable are they with this. Some gastroenterologists don't want to do this. They're like, no, 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 I just think you need to go get your stomach out. And so I think this is about finding the right person.
Hmm.
And you should never feel bad about going, you know what, I'm not feeling it. I'm going to go try to find somebody else. If you can, of course. You know, you're not going to, don't worry about hurting a doctor's feelings because you want to find a second or third opinion. Don't ever feel bad about that. Um, I missed the last part of your question because I saw a question from Wyatt Hamilton and I was reading it.
Yes.
But what was the other part of your
Um,
question?
I think ask what questions to
Yeah.
ask yourself,
Uh, I think you need to ask yourself, are you comfortable with this? This goes back to your thing, right? You know, there are people out there that love to jump out of airplanes, right? Not me. I'm not jumping out of an airplane.
Mm-mm.
So, right? So you have to figure out where you kind of fall in that kind of risk aversion kind of, you know, whatever. So I think you have to say, am I comfortable doing this? Um, is it something that's going to kind of either keep me awake at night, or is it something that every year when I go to get my endoscopy that, you know, the stress and whatever is overwhelming? I mean, just you really have to kind of determine if you're comfortable with it. Again, I think don't let other people push you one way or the other. It's
Right.
really about, you know, are you gonna be able to do this? And knowing that at least for surveillance, you can change your mind at any time, you know.
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah,
Uh, so what's next with
yeah,
research? I think from the community, is there any potential for going back and researching kind of the long-term effect of surgery? And
yeah,
is there any potential for how it affects I don't know, discussions that I've had with other stomachless friends is, you know, how it affects our emotions, how it affects our kind of um, energy levels is a
yeah,
given, but I think more
yeah.
so like just kind of, not that it changes your personality, but I think your body is working harder to keep your old personality.
I don't know if your personality's changed very much, but you
No,
know.
it's a lot of personality to change, so.
Yeah. I'm not going to go there, but what I would tell what I would tell you is that, you know, you a lot of you guys would come back to clinic and say, man, either I got this like brain fog or I'm a little forgetful or whatever. It's hard to know. So I would put the future research into a couple categories.
Mhm.
So, and I'm going to address Wyatt's question in a second. Um, the first is from a surveillance standpoint, right? Because what I would love to do is say, okay, if you want to do surveillance, how can we make it as reliable as we possibly can? So that means employing either new technologies, right? Not just endoscopic surveillance, but can we do some sort of blood test or stool test or something non-invasive to do surveillance? And we're not the only people interested in that. There are other people in this space, you know,
Mhm.
CDH1 that are interested in that. For instance, Wyatt said, well, why not take one of the biopsies and test it for this, that, or the other? I think that's a great point. And I think that's something that we can do probably more so in the near future than maybe some of the other blood tests or whatever. But I think he's hitting on something, which is how can we add to what we're already doing to kind of make it more definitive, right? We can say, yeah, everything's fine, and we can be certain that everything's fine, kind of thing. So I think in terms of surveillance, it's a combination of either new technologies, exciting technologies, and you know, non-invasive ways of doing things. But let's talk about you've already had your stomach out, or you're going to get your stomach out because you are high risk, and we all kind of agree, like, hey, this is the right thing to do. You're right. You know, we don't know what life is really like 20, 30 years down the road. And we're learning from a lot of you guys already. And Dr. Galanis, one of the fellows at NIH, wrote a nice paper about this. But we just started to scratch the surface, right? And I know that we talked a lot about it, a lot about this in Portugal. We need to do a lot more. It's kind of like if you guys ever have known anybody with breast cancer that they have these so-called survivorship clinics. And what survivorship is about is like what life after cancer diagnosis or cancer treatment. And I think we need to do more in that space, not just for people having prophylactic total gastrectomy, but maybe people that have gastrectomy for gastric cancer in general, right? But it runs the gamut of, you know, psychological kind of stuff, physiological stuff. How's your body, you know, working and doing its thing? And then what are the long-term consequences, right? We've talked about bone health and bone density and, you know, all kinds of stuff. Um, the other part, though, is the kind of the one that'll put you to sleep if you read it is, you know, we need to understand why cancers are developing in the first place because of this mutation. And for instance, we know that you guys are all carrying those signet ring cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about those signet ring cells that makes them different or unique? We wrote an initial paper about this a few years ago. We have another one getting ready to come out. When it comes out, we can do another Instagram live, and I can really put you guys to sleep with some of those data. But we really just need to understand the how and the why, because then the next step is, and this is what Perry Guilford and other people are really interested in, is then rather than changing your DNA and doing gene therapy and all that stuff, people have asked me about CRISPR technology or whatever. Let's say we can't do that. And let's say you've got the mutation, sorry, we can't change that, and you've got these signet ring cells, sorry, we can't change that. But if we know the how and the why they do what they do, maybe we can take something else, a drug or other thing, to kind of stop those signet ring cells in their track, or, hold them at bay, if not get rid of them altogether. And that's a super exciting area of research that I know a lot of people are interested in. The problem is that part of the research, out of all the things I mentioned, probably, will move the slowest, right? Because that involves research in the lab and all that stuff. But if people care about it, which I know they do, funding that research is important, because there's a lot of funding out there for cancer research, and there are a lot more common cancers: breast cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer. Stomach cancer doesn't get a lot, and I think we can learn a lot from people with CDH1 mutations that will help us understand stomach cancer in general. And so I think investing in that research is super, super important, because for you, it may not affect you directly right now, but it could easily affect family members, nieces, nephews, kids, whatever, at some point.
Right. And with that same, if figuring out the stomach signet cell like trigger, would that also correlate to the lobular breast cancer, or is that a completely different beast, or are they related, or is the research just totally separated?
So that's a fantastic question. And so it's like we planned this, but we didn't plan it that well. We're not that organized. When I was at NIH, we really wanted to understand the lobular breast cancer component as well, but we were a little bit limited there in what we could do. I had a fellow at the time, Dr. Gamble, who was super interested in it. And I think now that I'm actually here at University of Maryland, I think it's something we can actually do better here, believe it or not, than we could have at the NIH. To answer your question, I think if we can understand some of this in the stomach, like signet ring cell development and all that stuff, it may apply to the breast, but we don't know. So we need to study the breast cancer aspect of this too. And I wish there were more people out there studying it. I don't think there really are. So I think it's something that I feel kind of compelled to do, because if we can do it for stomach, then we should be able to do it for breast. Because if there are similarities, then that's great. We all benefit and patients benefit. If they're different, though, we need to understand that, again, the how and the why, so that we can, again, better inform women about their breast cancer risk. Should you have a prophylactic bilateral mastectomy, or maybe there's some form of, chemo prevention. So if I had one thing to ask, it would be, let's, as a group, as a community, let's also talk about how we can move the ball, so to speak, down the field with respect to lobular breast cancer risk as well, and not forget it, and not, sweep it to the side. Because I know stomach cancer gets the bulk of the, the interest, but we can't forget that a lot of you guys have chosen to remove your breasts, and that's kind of a big deal too.
Yeah. And I know in the group, a lot of people have found the gene because
Yeah,
they were first diagnosed with lobular breast cancer, and then they're like, "Oh, wait, this is bigger than
yeah,
than just the breast cancer."
yeah,
And that's so for I know that with Dr. Gamble, I sent my breast tissue to NIH. Is there, as patients, how can we help with the research?
yeah. That's a great question. And by the way, I have all of that. Okay,
Great.
so
Is it
it's
labeled?
under lock and yes, and it's under lock and key. It's all, we've got it. So, couple ways. Number one, people should participate in research, and I think that this is the one thing that's hard to kind of really push, because I know that practically there are people out there, let's say they're in, I don't know, Oklahoma, and they go, I'd love to participate in research, but I'm in Oklahoma. I need care and I need to get it where I can get it. What can I do? So my first request is to say, once we have our study up and running here, just like we had at NIH, but we're going to do something very similar here at Maryland, you don't have to physically come here to participate in research, but like, you share information, maybe you send some of that breast tissue and we figure out how to do that and all that kind of stuff. So that's number one. Participate in any way you can, and participate, I think, again, in meaningful research. If somebody at the University of Oklahoma says, I'm doing this, I'm studying this, ask questions, right? It's good that they're studying it. If they're studying it in isolation, though, and they're not, part of a larger group, or they interact with, folks like me or Perry Guilford or others, right, we're missing potentially opportunities. That's number one. Number two is talk to your family. Same thing. Spread the word in the family. Are you at risk? Do you need to get tested? And oh, by the way, if you test positive, we should think about as a family, participating in some sort of research to help. The last part is, though, advocacy, fundraising, those kinds of things, right? Raising awareness, right?
Mm.
And then helping to raise money for research, and research dollars that go to people that are doing the stuff that's meaningful to you, right?
Mhm.
So I think, again, we can only do so much
Mhm.
without the support. And like I told you, the paper that we just talked about, No Stomach for Cancer, DLH, Stupid Strong, right? We couldn't have done it without them. The paper that's coming out soon, the basic science paper that's focused on those signet ring cells, same thing. Couldn't have done it without No Stomach for Cancer, DLH, and Stupid Strong. So those are examples of, if we hadn't had that kind of support or advocacy, it, it that research may not have been able to happen.
And it's important that it does happen because, and what's so hard is you don't wish that there was all of this research until you're the one who needs
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And um, it's not an easy decision to have the mastectomy or gastrectomy, and it's really exciting that y'all are making such progress on surveillance being a really viable option. So thank you for your research and for working so hard for this community. You are our treasure, truly an internationally leading man here.
okay, easy does it,
I
easy
know,
does it.
I know.
I'm not good with
Um,
that stuff.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I kind of want to ask like a couple fun questions to wrap up. I
Okay.
won't take up all of your morning. But I'm curious, what's like the trickiest part of gastrectomy surgery?
Ooh.
I mean, not you, but other surgeons who are like, ooh, this is the part that's gonna,
Well,
is it reconnecting or?
yeah, yeah. I think for any of us who do the gastrectomy operation, I think, taking the stomach out is relatively straightforward, right? There are steps, you cut, you do this, whatever, okay? It's when you put things back together, and this is probably true of almost any surgery that we do in the body.
Mhm,
Sometimes the reconstruction
mhm,
part is the more stressful part. Um, And so reconnecting the intestine up to the esophagus is stressful because if it goes well, then all is good,
Mhm.
right? We're all happy. What happened with that? Did it's because I made a sign?
Yeah.
Okay. God, I got to be careful with those hand gestures. Um,
It's a party.
I guess. So anyway, so all is good if it goes well, but the problem is that if it doesn't go
Mhm.
well. So I think, if a surgeon is talking to you honestly,
Mhm.
they're going to tell you that yeah, that's the part that keeps me awake at night while you guys are in the hospital. That's the part that if it doesn't go well can be problematic.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'll tell you, I'm pretty relaxed and calm, and I have a lot of fun when I'm doing the operation, except that little part. Then I probably get a little bit more serious, and maybe not super fun to talk to for those 10 minutes or whatever that things are going on.
Um, if you weren't a surgeon, what would you be doing with your life?
Oh my God. You know, I don't, when I was trying to get into med school, I thought about this. I was like, oh, what if I don't get into med school,
Mhm.
And at the time, I was like, oh, maybe I'll be like a high school teacher. I'm glad in hindsight, I think that would have been a bad idea. I think high school teacher, I'm not so sure I have the patience for high school, kids. Um, I don't I don't know. I mean, I like this idea of teaching,
Mhm.
so maybe I could do something in college or something like that. I'm not so sure I've got the patience for high schoolers. But man, beyond that, I don't know if I have a lot of talents to be honest with
This
you.
is
I'm not so
the only
sure.
thing. This is it.
I don't, I,
Removing stomachs, research. That's it.
yeah, I really, I mean, I can't sing, I can't dance, I mean, I guess I'm good with my hands. I don't know, maybe I could do some sort of building or carpentry or something. Maybe I'd be okay at that. I don't know. I really don't know. I like landscaping kind of stuff. I like moving dirt around I don't know, maybe.
Well, on behalf of the CDH1 community, I'm glad that you are not a landscaper and that you chose med school.
Okay,
So,
okay.
but thank you. I hope that this has been informative for everyone who wants to know the information in the paper, but like me, kind
Yeah.
of hits the snooze button. But
I don't blame you. I mean, I don't blame you. I mean, listen, you start reading this and it's just, it's enough to kind of, so if you have problems sleeping, right?
yeah,
This is our infomercial.
yeah.
Forget the Ambien or the whatever. If you can't sleep, read one of my papers.
Well, and we will do this again the next time that you write another paper.
Yeah, we should do it. We should do it. I mean, this is totally, I think this is fun. I even borrowed a ring light from somebody down the hall. So, I mean, I
So
feel like
proud of
I'm I'm
you. You look
I'm
great.
I'm practically a professional.
You are going to be the newest influencer, and I just can't wait to see you as a content creator.
Awesome. Let's make the fireworks go again. I want to see if that works. I love it. That was great.
Very good. Very
Okay.
good.